Okay, we are live. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're here today to talk about pre-code movies that are with female leads from 1929 to 1934. And right in 1934 is when the code came into effect and movies became heavily censored. We're Coffee with Aliens at the Movies. We're a film education and film review channel. Again, if this is your first time here, or if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to our channel by clicking on the subscribe button in the description box below, and then click the bell to get notifications every time we go live or release a new video. My name is Robert Bellissimo. I'm an actor and acting teacher.
I'm Steve Chambers. I'm a writer and actor, and we are super happy to have our guest today, Miss Raquel Stetcher, who has a YouTube channel and blog out of the past. And also, happy belated birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday. I saw it.
Is a writer for TCM. So right off the bat, how did that come about? The gig with TCM.
So I've been collaborating with TCM over the years, and I was invited within a group of like other bloggers who we were all invited to contribute to the TCM blog, which is on their Tumblr.
Yep.
So, and then that branched into research articles. So I write articles for their website on individual movies. I interview some of their authors, and then I write pieces for their blog, and it's a lot of fun.
No kidding. That's a dream job.
That's
like
awesome.
We talk about TCM all the time on here.
I still pinch myself that it happened.
Yeah, that's good for you. I mean, that's super,
amazing.
Super cool. That is amazing.
Did you ever meet Robert Osborne or Ben Mankiewicz?
I did.
Oh, you did,
I
eh?
met him the one time. I saw him several times, but I met him the one time, and he's as nice as you think he would be.
Right.
He is so. I love that guy.
Yeah, he was just. He had a presence about him, and he just genuinely loved what he did, and he loved other people. You know, you could just tell. So I just had a few minutes with him, and it was amazing.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
I like hearing that.
Great.
Like, he is like what you imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Say, oh yeah, I met him. He's a tyrant. Like, oh.
You hear those stories sometimes, but he was,
for sure.
You know, exactly as you see on screen, he was off screen too. He was just a very genuine person.
Oh, that's so cool.
and a really interesting backstory as well. Like I didn't know he was an actor, and then he said he didn't really find what he wanted to do until TCM, until he was doing the hosting, right? So,
yeah, Lucille Ball told him that, as he was becoming a historian of Oscar history, he was gathering all that information. And Lucille Ball was like, "Why don't you just do that for a living? Why don't you become like a film historian?" Yeah.
Yeah, because he was on her show. He worked with her, I believe.
Yeah, in a production company. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's remarkable. Yeah.
Lucille Ball. Oh my God. I want to start off with saying thank you for picking this subject, because this was something as is often, Robert can attest to this, the case on our show, when a subject comes up that I'm not familiar with, I start with a homework. And he knows.
Good homework.
Well, it is, because it was one of those cases where midway through, not just watching the films that I picked, but reading about all this, that I came up with the following, I never thought about this. So I, for one, I don't remember not hearing of the Hays Code or the Breen Code or any code. And I always knew there was like a year it changed, 1934, but I didn't consciously pay it any mind. I didn't think it meant anything. I just didn't give it any thought. Not long ago, around Halloween, one of our correspondents, Vanessa, picked as her subject pre-code horror films. And I remember thinking, just say old horror films. What's the difference? I didn't get it. And I didn't. So upon watching my films here that we'll be discussing, and then the ones you guys talk about, what I realized is something I'd always known, just not consciously. I'm like, oh, all these movies I'd seen, obviously, movies pre-1934 before, but I never consciously gave thought to the fact that, these seem dangerous. There's something more, and I was saying to Robert before we went live, punk rock about these movies. And what I mean by that is, if the Hollywood Breen Code were the record company. They took the punk rock and made it synth pop, and nothing against that. Like, I mean, most of my favorite movies are after 1934, but I didn't realize, like, oh, they just put a stop to things.
Yeah, things were more sanitized after.
Oh, but like the day after, like because you look at a movie in 1936 or whatever, or certainly by 1940, like, whoa. And I won't get into all of it now because this will all come up, I think, while we talk. But, you know, you couldn't show, be it violence or sex of any kind or any intensity or whatever you want to call it. The main thing, and this is why I'm thankful that you specifically picked women, is like, oh, we just put a stop to women, didn't we? Like, the world would be a different place. Because if you think about how culture affects art and art affects culture, vice versa, whatever, movies certainly would have been a hell of a lot different if this code weren't implemented. And I think culture would have been, because the first thing I noticed with the films I watched is like, oh wow, women were just like regular human beings and could lead a film, and no one really, that was normal. And then all of a sudden, like, nope, you make tea and you put on your thing, and you can only kind of have one woman in a movie and the other women are your competition. Like, it just, everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conspiratorial part of my brain wonders, why then? Why this code? Why at that time? Why? Who's behind? Because I know the code existed, but why was it so suddenly enforced in 1934? Was there an agenda? Enlighten me if you can. I don't understand why this sudden aggressive shift.
So you got to understand, like, to the beginning of everything, you have World War I, and then the suffragist movement. Women got the vote. Women became liberated, you know, in the 20s. You got the, you know, the flappers. They're drinking, they're dancing, they're more in tune with their sexuality. And then as the 20s progressed in the film industry, you had like humongous scandals like the Fatty Arbuckle case, you know, and what happened was the government took notice and was saying, you know, these films, you know, these people who make these films and these films have quite an influence on the public. So Hollywood was very scared that the government would come in and regulate things. So they decided to self-regulate. So they came up with the Hays Production Code that had a list of rules of what can be shown in terms of, you know, sexuality and crime and morality and ethics and all sorts of things. And then Hollywood was not very good at enforcing their own censorship.
Right.
So filmmakers, as starting with 1930, you have the talking pictures, you know, they're like that shift from silent film, and then we're in the throes of the Great Depression. So studios are desperate to get, you know, butts in seats, get people out into the theater.
Right.
So what do? You push the envelope a little bit, see what you can get away with. Push a little more, and then that's as you see from like 1930 to 31 to 32 to 33, how more provocative and titillating the films become. And then it got to the point where it was just out of control. But then they figured out with the Breen office, and they figured out exactly, okay, we really need to self-regulate. We need to censor these films because they're getting out of control. And that's when the things shifted. So they figured out how to do it effectively. Because at one point, states were actually regulating their own films. Like, you could have one film distributed to all the states in the United States, and they would edit the film based off of their own like regulations. I'm from Boston, so banned in Boston was a huge thing. So, and it was just out of control. So they finally figured it out in 1934, and then we lost that magical era. It came to an end.
Quickly.
But then we still have those 3.5 years of like glorious movies to enjoy.
Absolutely. Such unique, and not just like the obvious, like what you see on screen, you know, per scene, but like the stories themselves. Robert and I were talking about, whoa, that story of, you know, whatever film X wouldn't fly in the 40s, and in fact, some of these I'm like, well, this could be made now. It's kind of, I just
Yeah.
really felt like, geez, in the 30s, things just went so far backwards that it wasn't until, whatever, the 60s where we finally kind of got as loose as the 30s again. And,
Yes.
and so
That's when the production code really ended. And
Right.
you got, yeah.
And
The
then I
rating
guess that's when
system
we
came
got
in.
our, exactly. That's what I was going to say. That's in the late 60s, I imagine, right?
Yeah, 68.
68. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. But anyway, so what a school I just, put myself through here. So thank you for that. That was really cool.
And thank you to Vanessa. Vanessa loves pre-code films,
she
so I'm
does,
glad that she.
And that's what started me noticing the difference consciously.
And I just wanted to say hello to Vanessa. Vanessa is watching.
Hi,
Hello, Vanessa.
Hi,
Nathan Jones is also watching.
Nathan.
I know you know Nathan as well.
Hi, Nathan.
Raquel.
Oh yeah, I see.
And Vanessa said a lot of church groups boycotted films in the early 30s, and audiences shrank quite a bit due to these boycotts.
Right. Right.
I didn't know that. Okay. Because the Breen was also
the Legion of Decency was a huge aspect of it too.
Yeah,
and just throughout the 40s and 50s too, there's a lot of regulation from churches, especially when you had these churches who tell people don't watch this movie. That would hurt the studios.
Yeah, especially then. Yeah, I can imagine. I kind of guessed there's a huge influence there.
But do you? Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Steve.
you go ahead. I was just going to ramble.
I was going to ask Raquel, but wasn't like the Hollywood Reporter and certain tabloids, weren't they mocking the code between 29 and 34, like making fun of it, like it's like nonsense?
Yeah, I mean, they really were, because Hollywood wasn't good at censoring itself. Like, eventually it had to figure it out. And even if you watch movies like after 1934, once you get into like the post-World War II era, and I know 50s, like with the 50s, everyone thinks of like, the white picket fence and like, the nuclear family and everything being sanitized. But you get some really provocative films in that era, like Baby Doll, for like Ilya Kazan's film, or really quite violent films, or like films like The Night of the Hunter, which is quite scary, So they start to push the envelope, and that leads to the 60s. So even though things get cut off at 1934, Hollywood still resisted the censorship.
That's true. Yeah,
it stifles creativity in certain respects, but then it also forces them to be more creative than others. I was just
going to say that. I think it was Edward Dmytryk, the director. He said he didn't mind the code because it did force us to find new ways to get this message across, or to quote him, ways to be devious.
Like with Hitchcock films, like you might have a train going in a tunnel, and that means something other than what you think it means. Or you'll have like the production code limited kissing. How long a kiss could last. So then you have a film where Grace Kelly and Cary Grant are giving them like each other little kisses for a long time. So the breaks
stop every 3 seconds.
Exactly. So you can get around the rules. So they were really smart with things, which is kind of also really fun to look for that. Those
100%.
Subversive, like the subtext and the references.
Well, did you ever see the documentary The Celluloid Closet? I think Lily Tomlin narrates it, and it's about all the hidden homosexual overtones or undertones that existed in films from the 40s and 50s, and audiences like, do you see what they're saying there? Or look at that guy, look at this. And watching the documentary, you revisit scenes you'd seen, you're like, oh, okay. And it is
like a treasure hunt in a way.
Exactly. And that is.
Well, I think the big thing there's actually a good documentary on Rock Hudson about how a lot of his movies were like, they were basically saying he was gay. Without actually, but making it to a joke, because who's gonna believe this guy's gay? Look at him; he looks like
his name's
in Pillow Talk. Like there's a whole scene with him and Doris Day, and he's pretending to be a mama's boy, you know, and that was just like a stereotype. Yes,
well, I just watched that again like a couple months ago. I love their films together. But so it did force filmmakers to be more creative. But today we're going to focus on the films. We're not to say that these filmmakers weren't creative, but pre-code. So Raquel, I want to start with you. Round one, you picked the film Safe in Hell.
Yes. So Safe in Hell is probably one of the most brutal, unflinching pre-code films you'll ever watch. It is, I think it's ahead of its time. I call it the Me Too pre-code because it's really about the dangers of sexual harassment.
Yep.
So Dorothy McHale, who was a star in the pre-code era and didn't quite make the transition after pre-code, but she stars in this film. She worked as a secretary for this really horrible boss who wanted to sleep with her. She refuses. Not only does he fire her, but she can't get a job anywhere. So she's forced to be a prostitute. And they meet up again, and they get into a fight, and she leaves him for dead. She gets smuggled out of the country and to Tortuga, which is an island in Haiti. Okay. And there you can't extradite criminals back to the United States. So she's hiding out there with a bunch of other criminals. So it's like she's, and all of them want to sleep with her. It's like, I equate this to her being on an island with Bill Cosby, Harvey Weinstein,
oh God, your worst nightmare.
Think of all the bad ones. She's stuck on this Caribbean island with a bunch of criminals, and she can't escape anything. Like it's just really, it's basically about what women have to deal with being the object of desire, but in really bad circumstances. And it is just like, and the whole thing, the title is a reference to her not being safe anywhere except for hell. She's only safe in hell. That's how horrible her situation is. Right. Now, it's kind of an obscure pre-code, but I think it's really important because it shows that she tries everything she could possibly do to keep her pride and not give in to the machinations of these evil men in her world, you know, and she has this, you know, wonderful romance with the love of her life, but so it shows her struggling to overcome things, but also how society kind of oppresses women in this way, especially in this time period. It's not an easy watch, but I think it's a pre-code that really tackles one topic in a really interesting and provocative way. And I always recommend it to people if I can.
Okay. I couldn't find, I tried to watch it last night and I couldn't find it anywhere.
It's kind of obscure. It's let's see,
you got to get a physical copy, I suppose.
Yeah,
right?
This is a DVD MOD made on demand from the Warner Archive Collection, which I believe is only available in the United States. I don't know where else it could be available. It is very obscure.
Yeah, I couldn't. Did you have any luck, Steve? I couldn't. No. I couldn't find it.
I did find the DVD. One of your guys' films. Yeah, that was a hard one to find. You said something really interesting, Raquel. You said certain stars didn't transition from pre to post code. Why is that?
Yeah, it really depends. Like, for example, Anne Dvorak, she made a lot of really great pre-code. She was in 3 on a Match. She was in Scarface, but she also took great pride in her personal life and didn't want to sacrifice that a lot. So she did, like, her co-stars in 3 on a Match include Bette Davis and Joan Blondell, and then they went on to have longer careers. But Anne Dvorak wasn't able to quite make the transition from pre-code and beyond. After that, and there's like Warren William, who was like one of the top pre-code stars, but he also didn't quite make the transition. I'm not really sure why. I love watching his films.
It's interesting. I wonder, because it's not like, when I hear someone didn't make the transition, I imagine like from silent to talkies, and I get it. But with the code, it just something I flagged. Like, what about the code? Why couldn't they make movies anymore? But as you say, it's case by case, right? It's just
I mean, like Dorothy McHale. I mean, she's so
I've never heard of her.
Sexy and provocative in Safe in Hell. Maybe she wouldn't have worked with the more sanitized, films of like the late 30s and early 40s. It maybe just didn't quite vibe.
That's what I was imagining.
Yeah, it must have been the content. I imagine maybe had something to do with
some stars were able to evolve, like Barbara Stanwyck. Her career evolved over many years.
Yeah, I know her more from. I was surprised in one of the films. I forget which. I watched her in one of them, but I think Night Nurse. But Yeah, I was surprised. I knew her more way like from the Ford, like Sorry, Wrong Number. And
I know she had a great career in film noir.
Yeah,
I feel like if Dorothy
that's all I
McHale
know.
could have held on a little longer, she could have made like a really great like femme fatale in film noir. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Robert, your first film.
So formal.
Yes. 1930s, The Divorcee.
Ah, yeah, The Divorcee. But just before I jump into that, Vanessa said Safe in Hell is on Amazon, is available through Amazon.ca. I imagine she's talking about the DVD.
The DVD, though, right? Because I'm pretty sure I looked. Yeah, it's not streaming.
Oh, that's great.
But that
Chris Mohan says he's been listening so intently he forgot to say hi. Good.
Oh, hi.
Good.
Hi.
That means we're doing well. Yeah, The Divorcee, I really, really enjoyed this film. And again, it's essentially about what it's like to be in a relationship and whether you're strong enough to go through the ups and downs of it. But here we have a woman who marries a man, and they're very much in love. And then before you know it, he cheats on her. She finds out, and then as a way to get back at him, cheats on him, and then he's mad about it. And there's a great scene where she wants to work it out, but she realizes he's only mad not because he's hurt, not out of pain that, oh my God, she cheated on me, but out of his male pride of how dare you, I'm the man here. And so she leaves him, and then after she leaves him, she's, goes out with other men, and she's not very happy with anyone else. But what I love about it is that it showed a woman, standing up for herself, making her own choices, having more than just one partner, leaving someone if she's not happy, but then growing through it because really there's another friend of theirs who was in love with her, who married someone else, and then she was going to get with him. And then she realizes when she meets the wife of the guy that he's going to leave, she already knew her, and she's so upset about it. And then she realizes, if you make these kind of promises, you should really, really give it your all. But and even the male character, sure, he is a total chauvinist and a total hypocrite, and but he does learn, like he doesn't just stay on a macho train. Like he is someone who realizes he did something wrong. He realizes he lost the woman he loved over being selfish and pig-headed and thinking he can do whatever he wants, and he accepts that they can't be together. But it's her who ultimately is the one that says, let's really give this a try. Let's really work on this. And I thought that's interesting because so many love stories are so black and white. They're either so in love or the marriage is so bad. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but and it gives people a false impression about relationships because when you're with someone long term, you are going to hurt each other. You're not going to necessarily cheat on each other, but you are going to hurt each other. You are going to have times where you're distant or don't agree or come together, come apart, love each other one day, hate each other the next. And I thought, Jesus, this was in the early 30s. They really showed what love in a relationship is like. But I thought it was so good. And like I said, just to see these people grow and learn and be a woman independent, making her own choices and not taking shit and standing up for herself, not just laying down and accepting the laws of the relationship, right? So really, really, really good. Yeah, I think Vanessa.
Yeah, this is the film that cracked open the pre-code era. It really did.
Right.
Norma Shearer was the queen of pre-codes and the queen of MGM at the time. And she fought really hard to get this part. Her husband was a major executive and producer at MGM, and he was like, "You're not right for this part. This woman is very sophisticated, very glamorous, very sexy. You haven't been playing these roles before." So she went to George Hurrell. She had heard that Ramon Navarro had told her, oh, George Hurrell does these really amazing glamorous portraits, you should get some done. And then she went and had this glamorous photo shoot, showed it to her husband, and he was like, okay, you're right for the role.
That's cool.
Well, yeah, because she
really
was
had
a
to
very
prove herself, and
Right.
then she became. Then she had all these amazing pre-codes, like A Free Soul is a really good one too. And I just thought that was really interesting. This is one of my favorites. It's got a great New Year's Eve scene. I love that one with all the streamers everywhere.
Oh yeah,
and,
at the end. Yeah, yeah. I read that about the photo shoot, and I was surprised that that they wouldn't think that she had a very seductive quality, because she really did. And,
so they really had to prove themselves, like, oh, how can I extend my range? And sometimes you have to take a risk in order to do that. Yeah. Right.
And but she was a very beautiful woman, and I heard that they wanted Joan Crawford, and then they went with her, and apparently Joan Crawford said, well, of course they're going to pick her. She's sleeping with the boss, right? Because her husband was
huge rivalry. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
But but really, but it almost makes me mad that we to this day don't see complex relationships like that. We still see, black and white in terms of what love is, and I'm like,
yeah, I mean, Hollywood's idealist. They want the happy ending.
Totally.
Of like the man and the woman getting together, getting married, and having children, and riding off to the sunset.
Well, usually it's also the focus to see the beginning of a relationship. It's usually like these two are oddly matched and they shouldn't like each other, but then we don't see what happens 6 months from now, right?
There's very few films that really explore what relationships are really like. I mean, Cassavetes is someone who showed that with his movies, but other than that, I very few that I can think about off the top of my head. But this was, if anyone wants to see it, it's on archive.org, I believe, which is a free internet streaming service. So you can find it there, archive.org.
I gotta remember that.
Archive. And is there a physical copy of that?
I have it. The forbidden.
I wanted to get that. Our library system here has that, and there's a few of those, right? Those are awesome.
Okay, I have 8 of 9 of them. I don't have all of them.
Wow!
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I love pre-codes.
Yeah. No, our library has a number of them. I've gotten a few of them in the past, because there's some great pre-code depression films, like purely about the depression.
Yes.
Wild Boys of the Road and films like that are friggin' incredible. But there you go. Forbidden Hollywood, if anyone wants to see The Divorcee. So, Steve, you're up.
So I think you saw this one, Robert, and I have no doubt Raquel has. 1931's Blonde Crazy.
Oh yeah, I just watched it.
What's interesting to me is I was saying to Robert before, I didn't know the ones I picked till after the fact all star Joan Blondell.
I'm wearing a Joan Blondell button today in honor. I don't know if you can see it. It's Joan Blondell fan club pin.
Oh wow, where'd you get that?
Yeah.
Oh, my friend Kate Gabrielle, she makes all these classic film related buttons. And she makes them for all sorts of stars and T-shirts and all sorts of things. So
I got a Bogart one on. If anyone
that's great.
Kiss Me, I Smoke. Even though I don't, but I used to. But anyways,
you quitter. Blonde Crazy is number one is Joan Blondell. So I didn't realize I did know Joan Blondell, but as a older woman. From I'm a big Elvis fan. She plays like his mom or something in some movie. But anyway, so I'm watching it. I'm like, she's familiar. But I'd never seen Joan Blondell young and on fire and amazing. And she's a scene stealer. Actually, and I'll bring that up, in every film I saw, she's the lead in Blonde Crazy. The other ones, she's not, but she may as well be. So in Blonde Crazy, I mean, technically, I guess the lead's James Cagney, but I think he was probably billed first, but I'd say minute per minute, she's on screen just as much. And
and she's the blonde he's crazy for. So
well, here's the thing. So
it's pretty equal. It's pretty equal between them.
That's my first takeaway as I was watching it. is I realize Cagney enters, so I'm thinking, oh, whoa, this is James Cagney. I guess it's his movie. But again, this is earlier in his career, though he'd already probably around this point done Public Enemy.
Yeah.
But so it's a heist film, really, and this is what blew me away. It's the adventures of a con man and his accomplice, who's Joan Blondell, a woman. And it doesn't play too heavily onto the kind of rom-commy or romance aspect. That is definitely infused, and there's a whole thing by the end that he's going to jail in a sacrificial way because he's a good guy and she'll wait for him, and sure. But before all that, it's really just watching, like, you know, George Clooney and Brad Pitt in Ocean's 11 or something. Like, it's just two cool people, and immediately what you get struck by is the two meet working in a hotel together, and Cagney hitting on her all the time. And she has no problem. What blew me away, she just hits him. She just all throughout the movie hits him, and with no like repercussion.
She's like smacking the hell out of him.
Yeah, he either finds it charming, but not in a silly woman, like as a okay, or like, yeah, I deserve that one, and yeah, she's so equal. But the other part of this is, so this was the beginning of my introduction to, oh, well, okay, well, women were way more powerful in these pre-code films, but there's this one little scene that you would not see this again for years and years. She's taking a bath. He comes into the room, I think walks into the bathroom. It isn't a huge, she's just like, what? I'm busy. And what I love is, you know, he kind of looks at her, and the camera doesn't shy away. I mean, she's not nude. She's in a tub, but nonetheless, you wouldn't see a man and woman in a bathroom with a woman taking a bath forever. So that happens. I flag that. He's looking for some money. Where do you have the cash? She yells out, "It's in my bra." I don't think we'd hear that word again for 30 odd years. He goes into the other room, picks it up, and admires it. I'm like, holy shit. Like, look, a man holding any female lingerie on film. Oh my God, this is 1931. And it's a fun
Welcome
movie.
to pre-codes.
Well, exactly.
This is the thing. Women in different states of undress and all sorts. You see more lingerie.
Well, I will touch on that in another film. Yeah, you do see a lot more lingerie. And in this one, I guess my real takeaway is the film's good. Like, it's totally entertaining. I think, young Ray Milland is in this.
He's a baby in this.
Well, he's
oh my
unrecognizable. He looks like a mime. Like the amount of makeup they put on him with his goop back hair. I'm like, holy shit, is that Ray Milland? But yeah.
And a very young Louis Calhern, who is the victim of the scheme that James Cagney and Joan Blondell have to get his money that he's betting on horses.
Yep. And the plot itself, like you said, like it's a cute, it's a good little, heist movie. I wouldn't call it a heist movie. I take that back, but that's an aspect of it. But it is a unique rom-com. But again, really, for 1931 to see the guy and the girl on such equal footing was a surprise to me, because the pre-codes I knew, again, I wasn't consciously seeking them out, but just were mainly horror movies. And again, in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, they were more daring, those horror films. But this is the first time I really saw a relationship depicted where she wore the pants. And again, I just like that would be wiped out in a few years, seeing anything like that. And so that was a real eye opener for me. What else? It's a good movie. It really is. And
this is a great example of a movie that's born out of the Great Depression. These are two people who are really just struggling to get by, and will do anything to pretty much survive. And also Joan Blondell, she was so spunky and vivacious, and she was also like her characters were very no nonsense, very straight talking, but also really authentic. And you could tell like her characters had a lot of heart, and it was just somebody you wanted to be around. And because she was just so good at that, like she just, as you said, she's a scene stealer. She's just really fun to watch.
For real too. She isn't doing any sort of, not vamping, but like, oh, look at me. It's what you kind of get accustomed to in films later. It's just like she's like eyeballs on whoever she's talking to, and Cagney, to me, surprisingly, because I'm thinking of the Roaring Twenties or White Heat, is sort of more the buffoon. I mean, he's kind of getting conned. She's, looking at him more often than not.
She's more level-headed.
Oh yeah, she's a little more street smart too, which again, I wouldn't see that for a while. Yeah, and like I said, I hadn't seen her young, I don't think, in any. No, I knew her just as from the 60s, 1960s onward. And
30s,
yes,
30s. Joan Blondell is just fabulous.
She's super cool. But
they also, like, that love story they have, again, it's not just it doesn't just lead up to one thing, like, okay, now they're together in the end.
Not
like, you
all.
see, she struggles to make a decision to be with him because he wants to continue this life of crime, right? And she's like, I don't want to do that.
No,
so
he goes another way for a while. Like, it isn't cut and dry.
It's not black and white.
That's the thing with PreCode Films and women; they have more agency in deciding who they want to be with,
right?
And they make decisions based off of either love or their situations. How desperate is their situation? Do they want to get ahead? So yeah, it is really interesting.
Yeah, no,
I wanted to ask Raquel because we still had mainly men writing these scripts and directing them. So where did they get this kind of insight into what was happening at that time with how women were progressing? Because we see often is the case that men know about men, so they write about men. Do you know anything about these directors or these screenwriters at the time?
So I did a little experiment with the list of movies that we all chose, and I looked at the screenwriters. Every single film we're going to talk about today had one female screenwriter.
Oh, okay.
Holy shit!
They were able to inform the female characters, build that dialogue, add that complexity. So you have, and also women screenwriters were big in actually early Hollywood because like the studios did actually really prize female audiences because they knew they need to have a love story to bring the female audiences in, or what they thought would bring female audiences in. They knew they had to have these really interesting women that would appeal both to men and women, so
that's interesting.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, it's funny because I as long as I've been watching films, it's only in the last few years that I've learned that early in Hollywood, was a lot of women were writing scripts and directing films, and basically, and I didn't, it's like these things have just been cut out of history, until now there's a.
Right.
No, it's true. That shifts after World War II. You get more male-dominated films and fewer women screenwriters. But in the 20s and 30s, there were a lot of women screenwriters, which is great.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
We put a stop to that. It's again, like, holy shit, things changed. So Raquel, round 2, 1933's female.
Yes, so this film, oh my goodness, it is wild. It stars Ruth Chatterton, and she's the head of an automobile company, which actually I read online that there was no woman leading an automobile company until a few years ago. So this is predated reality, essentially. So she inherits this company from her father, but she's really a self-made woman. And she is a high powered executive. She basically is in charge of a bunch of men. It's not something that audiences would expect. So this is quite shocking, right? And she's all business, but she has this one weakness, which is good-looking men. So she'll take a new hire. She'll invite him to her glorious Art Deco mansion, which I want to live in. It's amazing. Sure. And she invites him over, plies him with vodka. She has this beautiful rug, fur rug with pillows. She throws a pillow down as a gauntlet and invites the man to basically sleep with her. So she's she's taking victim after victim, and eventually she meets her match with George Brent.
Yeah.
And then she starts to shift because basically everything was emotionless before. Any kind of emotion that she put into anything was to her work, but eventually she sees that she doesn't want these flings anymore. She wants something with more substance. And then there's like, the ending is like, kind of a disappointment, for some people, because she does end up having to settle down with the guy at the end. And that's another part of the Hollywood idealism, like you want that happy romance at the happy romantic ending. But throughout the film, it's just really interesting because she's a super confident woman. She's all business. She's a working woman. She's very successful. So and also that's a theme with a lot of pre-code movies. A lot of these women are working. In the Great Depression, you have to make your money to survive. That's another interesting thing about women in pre-codes. A lot of them were not just, women at home. They were women out in the work field.
Oh, yeah.
And hers is especially interesting because she is in charge of this massive company. And I think what's really interesting too about Ruth Chatterton, her character is probably the most confident pre-code woman you'll get. Second to only like Mae West, maybe.
Mae West.
So it's really, she's a very dynamic character. It's a gorgeous film too, with all the Art Deco design and the costumes. And sometimes I'll just watch it and don't watch the end. Just cut it off.
I get it. Yeah.
And I know some people do that with pre-codes because they there was still censorship and there was still expectation. Yeah. So sometimes it's just a shift at the end, and some of us will just watch it what we'll enjoy.
Yeah, fair enough.
That makes sense, and that's true because there still was some censorship. Even in the one I'm talking about too, Working Girls has a similar ending as well. That's more idealist. But yeah, I'll have to check. Where is that on any streamers, or is that another one that you can only see in the Forbidden Hollywood box sets there? It's
this
in there.
One
okay.
is also in the same set as The Divorcee.
Okay. Great.
Number
Perfect.
2.
I gotta get that. Okay. I just wanted to. There's somewhat Jules Alexander asked. You mentioned Night of the Hunter. What is going on that you mentioned it in relationship with the topic? It seems to me to be an amazing movie. Oh, I think that was when we were just talking about films that were
how things
dark
got
and
sanitized, but they still found ways to...
Yeah, and that was one that Raquel mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, the 50s had a lot of like subversive and provocative films, and they're not really known for that. But their films like The Night of the Hunter was just outstanding, and it kind of stands on its own for how it's quite shocking. It's quite shocking film. It still unsettles me when I watch it today.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And then Nathan here says there are some great films of recent years that reflect real relationships too, such as Marriage Story, Blue Valentine,
Blue Valentine, absolutely.
Midnight. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I was talking more in terms of just since the code. That there's, of course there are exceptions, right? But there's so few. But yeah, all those three definitely are much more harder and complex.
Janine Basinger has a really great book called I Do and I Don't, which is about how marriage has been depicted in film history.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And how in how there were different interpretations of marriage. And how sometimes marriage was kind of tacked on to the end because it really wasn't the interesting part of a couple's journey. So I recommend that book.
Yeah, I got to read that. Cool. I do and I don't. Okay. All right.
Robert, you're up with 1933's Design for Living.
Oh yes, yeah. So this is this is a funny movie, right? But it's it's funny because when I was writing my notes, I wrote one of the notes I wrote was it almost plays like a farce, but then I was like, not really, because it's here we have two guys. They're both artists. One's a painter and one's a playwright, played by Gary Cooper and Frederick March, who I love. Right. Great actor. I was just mentioned to Steve.
Yes.
And Miriam, it's Miriam Hopkins, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah.
Miriam Hopkins. So they're both in love with her, and she can't decide which one to be with. So she decides to be with both of them.
That's right.
but but what's interesting is, yeah, exactly. But what's interesting is that she doesn't. At first, she says, "Okay, we're not going to have any sex. It's just, you guys got to get serious about your work," because they're both like extremely egotistical. They do a little bit of work, and then for the rest of the month, they're talking about how great they are. So she gets them really focused on their painting and on their playwriting, and as a result, Frederick March gets a play produced in London. So when he has to go to London, Gary Cooper and Miriam Hopkins, then they can't help but get together when they're alone together, and they ultimately marry each other. And then, from there it becomes, Frederick March comes back into the picture, and then he gets with her, and then she wants to leave Gary Cooper. And so all that fighting and, I can't decide. She's, breaks it off. And then she gets with someone else who's been in love with her for years, who acted like he was her friend, even though he had a hidden motive the whole time. But I don't want to spoil the ending, but it's this look at really about this woman who is torn between two men, and again, try something. Well, makes a decision and goes with it. Well, let's all try to be together. When that doesn't work, try something else, and again, makes mistakes, and then gets into a relationship that she's not happy with, but then is comfortable to leave that relationship if it's not working out after really giving it a chance. So that's an ongoing theme, I think, with all the movies we talked about, is that sense of independence, that sense of knowing who your mind, exploring your sexuality. Well, then I'll sleep with both these guys, so what? Like exploring who you are in more ways than one. So it's really that's why I say it's almost farcical in the sense that their partners are switching so much. But then I think, well, why is that a farce? Like when you think about how many people you may have gone out with, 1 month you're going out with someone, and then 3 months later you're going out with someone else, and then that, it's not uncommon that people are switching partners up every few months or every year or whatever, right? When you're dating, when you're essentially dating.
You didn't have the boyfriend girlfriend dynamic. It didn't exist. You just dated around, and then you picked someone, you got married. I mean, the courtship window was very short.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So you were basically, dating many other people just to see who worked.
Yeah, you're a free agent, man.
Yeah, exactly. But Gary Cooper, Frederick March are hilarious. Miriam Hopkins as well she has a real has a sense of innocence, but yet a sense of strength and sexuality. She actually, I don't know if the two of you agree, she reminded, well, I should say, January Jones. There's a real resemblance. Yeah,
I thought,
holy
see that.
shit.
Like a petite January Jones.
Yeah, petite. Yeah, exactly. I thought, oh my God, they could be like double. They looked a lot alike to me.
Yeah, I hadn't thought
and she's so captivating that you get why they're both like in love with her. Yeah,
and it's not, it's not that she's like some. It's not like Basic Instinct, right? Where she's like a seductress. Like, oh, they're all falling for her because she's so sexy. Like, they fall for her because she's sexy, but she's also funny. Like, she's clever. She's
another creative, like they are.
Yeah. It's not pure. They're not attracted to her purely on her looks. They're not just. It's not the moment where they cut to the guy's eyes and then cut to the woman moving in slow motion. How many times have we seen that shot? Right. Sometimes it's done well. I'm not saying but we see it a lot. And that was another thing that stood out to me. They're not just objectifying her. They like her. They love her because of who she is. And that I really appreciated. But that is a Criterion release. That is on the Criterion collection. And there it is. I knew Raquel had it. So it's not on the Criterion channel, unfortunately. But you can get the... I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will eventually come on. But there you go. You got to get the Criterion to see it. But yeah, great film. I really, really enjoyed that one.
And I love how it flirts with polyamory. they're not essentially a throuple, you know, but they kind of are. Especially that final scene. I don't want to spoil it, but they're just like that scene where they're kissing each other. You know, like one person, like this is Miriam Hopkins, and then
on the forehead.
This is like. Yeah, it hints at things, and there's also like some gay subtext too, because to me, like the Frederick March and Gary Cooper characters are very much a couple themselves. They've lived together for like I think they said
they were. Years. That's right. They were friends.
Kind of in a relationship, and then Miriam Hopkins kind of just enters like their already existing dynamic, and it kind of expands rather than her being sort of a threat. Like they do have this rivalry, but it seems like their friendship still is solid throughout. It was really interesting how it kind of flirts with different types of sexuality, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would never, even now, that like what was that TV series where there in this case it was a guy who had like 3 wives. There was a show that was sort of. That's right, Big Love, right? Like, other than that, you would never see that, even with, not often, like, even with a man having more than one partner, like, that he's married to, right? Like, it's so, like, even now, I think people would be like, whoa.
Yeah.
So, that was also quite something. But yeah, I highly, for anyone watching who hasn't seen it, highly suggest it. It's a really, really good one.
Living.
Yeah. Steve, you're up.
Yeah, this was a real fun light movie called Millie. Jesus Christ. This is a horror movie. This is the most upsetting, bleak film. I don't mean that in a bad way. It was good. It's just like,
I loved
it's
it.
Unrelenting. So here we've got an actress who Helen 12 Trees. Come on. Huh? I certainly never heard of this girl. But so I'll say first. So basically, we're watching this woman fall for a guy. They get married. They fall in love. She finds out he's having an affair, and then she tries again. That guy cheats on her. So okay, I'm done with that. But then, being pre-code, I don't know overtly, but she lives like a single woman and entertains and sees men. In fact, she moves in with that character Tommy. Moves in with him without being married, which and eventually some creeper falls for her daughter, who's been not eventually. I think he's been kind of eyeing her since she was a kid, and then once she turns, 16, so it's okay. He chases her down. Millie finds out about that, shoots him dead, goes to court. Her friends kind of come to her rescue because Millie, who you got to, like, the character is really interesting. She never wants to take alimony from the guys that have cheated from her because she wants to make it on her own. She's independent. And at the end, when she's tried for shooting this guy who was essentially raping her daughter, she doesn't want to say what happened because she doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want to put her daughter, her 16-year-old daughter, in a public light in any capacity. So she just, I just killed the guy. Yeah, the end. I'm not going to say why. But her friends come to her rescue. Her friends, Joan Blondell, I swear to God, stealing the show again, with actress Lillian Tashman. And these two right away, I think they're gay. And but we don't say
they sleep in the same bed together.
I was just going to say, like, right off the bat, there's 2 women in bed together, and it's just that I'm like, is this just me reading into this? And I'm like, oh no,
I mean, it's partly Great Depression requirement of, like,
100%, 100%.
but also
a great way they could have got through it
too. Yes,
but it's definitely there. But I was like, I don't want to be wrong if I'm reading into this. But
no, I read into that too.
You can't not. And but it's But it's it's heavy, but it's good. Like, I won't forget that movie. I don't really know what happened to the lead, Helen 12 Trees.
Oh, that's a really sad story.
I remember reading. It goes well with the film, doesn't it? Like, it's just
Yeah. She committed suicide at a pretty early age. Yeah. I have a friend who, Cliff Aliperti, he wrote a biography on Helen 12 Trees, which I believe he self-published. So I recommend reading that. She's a very obscure. She's also one who didn't transition out of pre-codes very well.
No, she didn't. I'm interested. Yeah, she's very interesting. Like, There's a scene I really like. It's the scene where she, happily with her two buddies, Joan Blundell and Lillian Tashman, at a nightclub, and her friends spot the husband, our leads, Millie's husband, with another woman. And they're like, let's just get her out of here. She doesn't need to see this, but she sees it. What does she do? She walks up, punches that girl in the face, as you would in real life, and doesn't pay for it in a good way. What I'm saying is, like, the movie itself doesn't judge, like, you can't do that. No, the movie itself is saying, yeah, whatever. And I don't think we'll see that again. Speaking of things you won't see again for years and years, she goes up, what are you doing with my husband? Bang. Case closed. Like, there's no repercussions on that. And they're understandably, the repercussions just being, okay, now you don't trust this guy. And she learns not to trust yet another guy. And it's a good movie, man. I did like it. It's heavy. And but I liked it. I liked it. Like, I say it because I'm surprised that I liked it, because I am. I thought, oh God, this is a bit much. It's unrelenting. But you know what? I'm not going to forget it. Right now, I can picture all of it really well. Really stuck with me. And Millie, which is on the Criterion channel, and I'm sure there's physical copies of it.
Is it? I didn't know that.
I don't know. I don't have one. I watched it on Criterion as well.
I thought you totally had it.
How could you not have it?
So much.
But I liked it. I think it's saying a lot. I think, who am I? But I think it is saying something about, right off the bat, that she refuses to take alimony while her friends are like, just take the guy to the cleaners, like, whatever, you've earned it.
That was a huge thing in PreCode Films with women, is their pride. They really had pride in themselves. You can see that a lot in Safe in Hell, the movie I recommended earlier. Yeah. And Millie actually reminds me a lot of Three on a Match, which Anne Dvorak has a similar trajectory. She leaves her husband and her child behind to be with this other guy, and but I mean, it wasn't cheating like in Millie. It was another reason. But she has this downward trajectory where she gets involved in drugs and all sorts of things. So, and then, like, Humphrey Bogart has a small role in that film that he kind of also takes her down another path. He's like a gangster in the film. But if you watch Three on a Match, Millie's kind of like a nice, like, Three on a Match is a little more well known, but Millie's kind of like a nice companion to it.
Okay, yeah, Millie I definitely never heard of, but I
was going to mention that
either.
The guy who then wanted to go out with Millie's daughter. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure if you mentioned, maybe I missed it, Steve, but he also wanted Millie, and then once it fast forward. Yeah, fast forward 10 years, and then he sees that guy, and he's like, hey, you should see her daughter now. Hey, go. They go to church on Sunday, so they go cruise this. Let's go to church to check her out. Like, the guy was
the church.
Not only that,
mom and her kid.
Yeah, not only that, and Millie tells him to not try to pursue her, and he's like,
clearly,
he's like, sure, like, I like, actually, it was a good performance, but I hated it. He's like, yeah, all right. I thought, oh my, sure, you're gonna listen.
Of course not.
Such an asshole.
I'm not disgusting. Anyway, Millie, that'll sit with you. Up next, Raquel's got this one. I did see 1933's Babyface with Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, I love that movie.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is probably one of the best pre-codes.
It is.
So good. And one of the things I had mentioned earlier is how, like, Hollywood pushed the envelope, and one of the things was precedent. Once one filmmaker had a precedent with one film, it gave leeway for another film to be made at another studio. And Babyface was really a response to MGM making Redheaded Woman with Jean Harlow. That one was such a huge success, and that is also kind of similar to this one. So Warner Brothers made Babyface kind of out of that, and Babyface stars Barbara Stanwyck as this woman who, kind of like Dorothy McHale in Safe and Hell, has been the victim of sexual harassment for a very long time. She works for her dad at this really sleazy bar, and all the patrons are always harassing her, except for one who's a cobbler / philosopher who teaches her Nietzsche philosophy. Yeah. So when her dad dies in like this crazy accident, she kind of takes the cobbler's advice to basically use her looks against men to get what she wants, right? So she packs up her friend Teresa Harris, who actually really interesting African-American character who is almost her equal in a way. Can't be quite her equal because of the time period, but she brings her friend to New York City and helps her friend while she's helping herself, which I thought was a really interesting dynamic. So she goes to New York City and she sleeps her way to the very top of it. Like she goes into this building where it's like a corporate office for a bank, and you see her literally sleeping her way up to the top. And as she does do that, you'll see her reading a book on etiquette. She's fine-tuning her language. Her clothes get more and more sophisticated. Her hair looks better. She's more makeup on. She's more jewelry on. So you see her getting ahead, but it's all emotionless. Like she's basically doing what the men in her life before were doing to her. She's just basically making all these men a victim of her scheme. But then she, like in Female, where Ruth Chatterton meets her match with George Brent, Barbara Stanwyck meets her match with George Brent in this film. And something shifts. I don't want to ruin it for people, but something shifts, and she realizes the emotion, like the emotional toll that what she's doing has to other people. And what's really interesting too is she has all this detail on these men that she's been sleeping with, and the bank really wants to hide it. So they offer her money to kind of keep her quiet, and she's like, no, I'd rather a job. You know, she's thinking long term. She's really thinking about, I mean, this is as I said before, this is the Great Depression. She needs to survive, you know, so she's really thinking for herself in the long term. So I think that's really interesting. This movie is super provocative. It like Barbara Stanwyck is really just like she has so many scenes where she's like sexually manipulating men, which I think is super interesting. Some people, you know, find this to be an anti-feminist film, but what I think is super interesting about this film and other pre-code films is that these women are almost relatable in a way because they're struggling through something. Even if the women came from privilege, there's still some obstacle in their way. And for Barbara Stanwyck, there's all sorts of obstacles. And it's showing like what sheer willpower will do, like what women are actually capable of. They're capable of being working women. They're capable of getting ahead. We're capable of playing the man's game, which I thought was super interesting. I mean, like her trajectory changes towards the end of the film, but it kind of shows women audiences like, oh, wow, there's like other options for women. Like I might not exactly want to do what Barbara Stanwyck's doing in this movie, but you know, hey, I can like, you know, I could get ahead somehow. Like it doesn't have to be like sleeping, you know, up the corporate ladder, but it could be, you know, using my smarts, you know, making like self-improvement. Like you'll see her doing self-improvement things to better herself throughout the film. So I thought that was super interesting. And this film is just like very titillating, very provocative. There are two versions on the Forbidden Hollywood set. There's the original film, and then there's the theatrical release. Now, the original film has a slightly tweaked ending. It's shortened, and then there's a coda, which I hate. Watch the original if you can. And then they strip away some of the Nietzsche philosophy in the theatrical release. And I thought that added a lot of depth because it gives her like she learns about the master-slave principle. She kind of learns to set aside morals to kind of move ahead in life, and that really adds something to her motivation of what she does afterwards. If you take some of that away, it's just like, oh, well, she's just turning this around on guys for spite. You know, no, but there's actually like
fair, yeah.
So
there's like a good reason as to why she's doing it. Yeah.
And you see her throughout the film cracking open a copy of one of Nietzsche's books. So that like the philosophy is actually really like part of the film, and the theatrical release strips that away a little bit. So if you can watch the original one, try to watch the original one. It's just slightly different, but it's better.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah, it was on the Criterion Channel because last year they had a whole like Stanwyck month.
Right.
And that's where I saw it, and I loved it. But it was taken down, but hopefully it'll come back. But I was struck by Stanwyck's acting. Like, this is, you know, Steve and I were talking to one day do something about actors before like method acting came in and how people were very truthful and real. And Stanwyck was so real. Like, and there's one scene I think it's her father she's getting really mad at early on, and it's like, whoa, like that is not like, to get to that depth of feeling without any training as an actor. I don't know how she learned to do it. I mean, maybe she just must have had great instincts or
she also came from really bad circumstances.
That's
herself,
right. Yeah,
so,
she had a rough life.
Yeah, so like that struggle, I mean, she could connect with that. So I feel
think so.
That scene where she pours the hot coffee on the guy's hand who's trying to her like sexually aroused. That's a really fantastic scene, and she does it without like blinking an eye. It's just like very natural. Yeah, she was just a phenomenal actor, just really, really good. But I guess right now for that DVD you have is where the only place you can see it. I don't know if it's on any streamers, but yeah, there we go. It might be. I'm not sure. It's very well. I mean, out of the films that I discussed, like this is probably the most well known.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really good film. I just wanted to say hello to Rob at the Movie Vault. He's late to the party, he says.
Hi.
Rob is here. You know what? But I actually, just so this is before we move on. Some of these rules in the code. I mean, I'm sure people get the gist of it, but like one of them is like you can't show white slavery. And it's like, I guess black slavery was okay, but it's like specifically white slavery, sex relationships between white and black races was prohibited, scenes of actual childbirth, ridicule of the clergy, couldn't say God, couldn't say Jesus, like the illegal traffic.
Rules. Yeah.
Like some of them, I'm like, what?
Well, Vanessa would know this too. Like in Frankenstein, the original
children's
pre-code, the doctor says, "I know what it's like to be a god." When they did Bride of Frankenstein, the sequel,
I read
35, that. Nope.
Yeah.
No allusion to that.
Like, come on.
I'm just a good doctor.
There's a PreCode film, A Free Soul, which hints at white slavery. I think Clark Gable is like enslaving people at one point. Like that's his like. I don't know, but it like I thought, like you can get away with it a little.
No. She means in life. Clark Gable was enslaving people. It's not a movie.
No.
You gotta watch Steve's sense of humor there.
That's how Clark Gable rolled.
I'm very.
I thought that meant sorry. I thought when they said white slavery, I thought they meant that you couldn't show whites as slaves. But that, I guess what they're saying is you couldn't show whites having slaves is what that they meant?
Like there was actual white slavery happening in the 20s and 30s.
I see. Okay. Right.
So it's hinted at in A Free Soul. I don't know if there's any other films that broach that subject, but it was a thing that was happening.
Okay, so that's what it meant. Okay, I took that as you couldn't show whites as slaves. I was like, okay, like white slavery. But anyways, okay, that makes
like, and one of the big roles too of the production code was criminals couldn't get away with their crimes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
But you see
that was another one here
with the PreCode films. Like some people are starting to get away with, in a weird way, they may be punished slightly. Like in Babyface, she's somewhat punished for what she's doing. It's not really a crime, but she's involved in something that is crime, and she's punished to an extent. Like her reputation is destroyed, and so you see that aspect. But yeah, like in later films, like especially you know, you'll see that in Hitchcock films too. Any criminal has to be punished at the end.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Robert,
who's up?
You've
Steve
got
here.
you 1931's Working Girls, which I also saw.
I haven't seen this one. I couldn't find it.
It's on the Criterion. It's on the Criterion channel.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, I looked for it. Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's on the Criterion. This is directed by Dorothy Asner, and they have a number of her films on the Criterion channel. I like this one. Out of the ones that I've been discussing, it was my least favorite, mainly because like what you've been touching on, Raquel, the ending, it was very idealistic ending. But again, all the hallmarks in terms of behavior from women, where we have two, they're 19-year-old young, late teenagers moving to New York, and they move into a boarding house, and this is, again, having to find their own jobs, having to be independent, being not. One sister is more afraid than the other, but just being tough, being strong, and again, like, okay, well, you start to date men, and you work, and you go about your lives. But what happens is one of the sisters has a job, and the boss falls in love with her, and he wants to marry her, and she is in love with her boyfriend, who's a lawyer. And then so he says, well, you're fired because I can't work with you if you're not going to marry me, I guess. So she loses her job, and then she was also a virgin, and her boyfriend, right after they sleep together, he leaves her for someone else. So now this poor 19-year-old woman has been fired and left by her boyfriend, and the other sister. Again, like taking control, taking charge, goes with a gun to confront the lawyer boyfriend and say, you're not gonna do this to my sister, right? So because now he left her for someone else, but now he broke that relationship off. Yeah. So she's saying, you're not. This is bullshit, right? But again, taking control, not taking shit, standing up for yourself, independent, making your own choices, making a living on your own, like all those hallmarks. The reason it was just the end that I thought, because ultimately the boss that fired the sister for not marrying her, then like the other sister falls in love with him. That I didn't really. It just didn't kind of.
There's a lot of disappointing endings.
Yeah, that didn't sit well. It felt very forced. It felt like, well, we gotta have them both fall in love and get married now. But again, even the lawyer character who takes this woman's virginity and then goes and leaves her for someone else. He also admits his mistake. He's not like being headstrong about it. Like he knows he did something wrong. He apologizes for it. So it's not so him just bulldozing his way through and doing what he wants. Again, mistakes, right? And forgiveness, and the woman forgives him because she ultimately really loves him. But yeah, I liked it. Other than that, it was just the end. You saw it, Steve. How'd you feel about that one?
Yeah, it was entertaining. But I'd say like the last quarter.
Yeah.
Sort of like the next thing I'm going to talk about, just sort of like, huh? and then also like the next one, and then it goes the end. And you're like, oh, okay. It was sort of abrupt.
Which one? What was your pick? What was your next pick?
But yours. Mine.
Oh, sorry.
No, yours. I just thought the ending was. It was abrupt. Like it was just rushed and sort of.
Yeah.
It pulls a gun on the guy. You marry my sister. Okay.
Yeah.
Happily ever after. And all right.
I feel like in some cases they didn't know, like they had this idea of this story, but then like, okay, well they had to wrap it up eventually.
Well,
so
listen,
sometimes like the way that they tied the loose ends is just really.
But this is the most common thing. Like I've heard producers talk about, you know, anyone can, as a script writer, anyone can start a story, anyone can have an idea. And when producers are pitched scripts, the first thing they want, how does it end?
Yeah, it's
because
very
a lot of people, it's really hard to get there. Like how many times have you met someone, not even a writer, just people? Oh, I got a great idea, and da 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 da. And well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then we'll set the house on fire. They all die. Or we force him to propose to her with a gun. And yeah, so I found that sort of with my next film, 1931's Night Nurse.
One of the spiciest
weird. Yes. I liked it, man. I did. And we got Barbara Stanwyck again. Awesome. Joan Blondell's got a part in this, not a big part. And Clark Gable, you know, the white slavery owner. And this film doesn't address that. But it's interesting. Like it is. Okay, number one, to say Raquel's, to comment on the raciness. Yeah, there's just no reason. You know what it was? It's like not again until the 80s did we have scenes where we needed expository dialogue, but we needed eye candy, so you had girls change. That wouldn't happen again till the 80s, and that happens a lot with the Barbara Stanwyck, and not Joan Blondell, but her other friend, or Blondell as well. But anyway, a lot of lingerie in
there's a lot of films that they do that, where they just like have them undress.
They're just undressing,
just to show some skin, you know.
And I admire that. Like, all right, guys. And then there's like toward the beginning, there's a male nurse just watching, like, there. And hey, and actually, they're not even like. They kind of turn around, just not even covering up. Like, do you mind?
These are women who are more comfortable with their bodies.
Exactly. Well, here's the main thing.
Yeah.
I think this was an example of seeing two friends, female friends, because often I found that the trend, often, not always, but often, as I said it toward the beginning of this video, there's usually sort of a lone female standout in a film. And any other female was her enemy or a femme fatale, like, or whatever, but they weren't just buddies. Like it wasn't like Newman and Redford and Butch Cassidy. Here it is. And I don't think we'd see that again for a while. And what I find strange about this film, and not negatively strange, it was interesting, is that like the first, I'd say more than half, most of the film is watching these night nurses. So it does take place in this sort of, I reference Twilight Zone a lot, but it feels like it to me, because it's in this world, it's overnight, it's all very separate from the rest of the world, and it works. And I think it looks, to me, it looks the most professional of all the films I'd watched. I shouldn't say the most professional, the most current. And you are watching these nurses, these night nurses, learn the ropes, and they're doing their job, and it's funny and it's interesting and all this. And a bootlegger comes in with a gunshot wound, and you got to report that to the police, but he's charming and she's cool, Barbara Stanwyck. It's all her little, secret. And at some point later in the film, Stanwyck's charged with taking care of this drunk woman who just lays about drunk, and then her shifty chauffeur, Clark Gable, and they've got a plan to starve her children to death to inherit the kids' money. And it's just like fucking dark all of a sudden. Now, how do they handle this? So you got Stanwyck's character, who's a high school dropout, and that bootlegger who is shot, a criminal, as the good guys in this film. And referring to something Robert had said about that code, you wouldn't see that again for a long time. A bad guy, technically, because he's a criminal, saving the day with a high school dropout nurse, and they're good, virtuous people. Whereas the kind of more authoritative figures, the professional doctors, which one PS is some like junkie, and he just is, and we just let that slide. And well, we don't let it slide. I think that's the point, is that something you'd see like Hitchcock do later, sort of like not trust authority, not trust in this case, like the doctor's ethics, is because everything that's quote unquote correct, authoritative, is going to let this child in the second portion of this film get starved. Like the parents can do what they want and whatever, and this kid will just be a victim, and life will, like, criminals will win. So we sort of have the criminal and the nurse overthrow what would be traditionally, the authorities. And so seeing I don't know bad guys, but technically the sort of bad guys win here. The not obviously virtuous win, save the day.
It's another thing with the Great Depression too, is like, bad guys sometimes end up being the good guys because everyone's just so desperate to survive and to get through, and sometimes ethics go by the wayside, or morality.
And whatever method it takes to save this kid in this case.
Yep.
And then I'd read
higher.
You probably So this film and The Night Nurse and Public Enemy were two of the big films that really got that Hays Code. Like, we got to enforce this. Mm-hmm. And I imagine in reference to Night Nurse, the lingerie, I guess, I don't know. They're showing a drunk who's just a drunk and she likes it. Showing a doctor who's a dope fiend and he doesn't face repercussions.
And that ending is so brutal.
Yes, but
it's like, I totally forgot about it, and then I watched it again, and I was like, "Oh, well, that was just a very casual thing." Okay.
That's what I mean. And it just went the end. Like, it was just, huh?
Which is, I can't imagine, like, audiences back then being like, "Wait, what? What?"
Oh God! If I'm like 90 years later, going, "What?"
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I mean, maybe people were more. Whatever.
Maybe it's better than having the really, like, nicely. I mean, because, like,
it is, though.
It has sort of it has a happy ending, but it also doesn't tie things up very.
No, it doesn't do like the relationship thing where, I mean, it obviously insinuates like these two will be a couple. I guess, I don't know, or maybe I'm just putting that on there because I'm so used to films doing that. I don't know, but these two people just get along and they're charming together, and the good guys won. And but no, you're right. Like, they didn't spend a lot of time and then developing the relationship into a marriage proposal, and then
I kind of like that. I like that.
No,
that
same here. Same here.
Yeah.
No, same here. And it didn't need to do that. But it's funny, in lieu of that, it just went, and the end. We're at a film credit. But it was cool. Like, I liked it. I did.
And this film is a great example of how precodes would get with more and more and more as the years progress. And 1933 is a year where you find really like what I like to call the spicy precodes.
Well, that makes sense, right? Because something must have pushed it so that the next year they went, okay, we're putting the brakes on what party you guys got going.
This is out of control. We need to stop it.
So, exactly. So whenever you want to see something racy, it's like, look when it stopped, and the stuff just before that will be the and I get it. Like, watching Night Nurse again with the just always changing and blown away. Like, holy shit! In a couple years, you never see this, man. And but
that one is on the Criterion Channel.
Oh yeah,
Night Nurse.
That's
one of the ones.
Also on this set.
Oh, okay, perfect.
On
it's on that DVD
they've
set.
got a Joan Blondell retrospective.
It's a fantastic collection. I highly recommend anyone watching to go see that.
Yeah.
I definitely want to see more of those. There's a question from Rob, the Movie Vault. Did the infamous Lombard on the ladder scene from No Man of Her Own have something to do with the decency code, etc., coming into being? I don't know.
I have no clue. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wait. Yes.
Yeah.
There you go.
We'll act like we know. I'm not sure what he's.
I'm not sure.
I've seen that movie, but it's been years.
Okay. I haven't seen that one, so I can't answer that one. Do you know when sorry, did we do all our movies, Steve? Did everyone do 3? Okay. I just had a couple of questions for Raquel. Do you know much about Breen, this guy who really enforced this code? There's
Joseph Breen and there's also Will Hayes.
Yeah.
They both. Yeah. It's funny. I was actually at a film festival in Rome, New York, Capital Fest, I believe it's called, and they were showing this little short documentary of Joseph Breen discussing some aspects of the production code, everyone was booing.
That's
I mean, when I do research on individual films, I learn a lot about, okay, what, like, Will Hayes really started things, but Joseph Breen really enforced them
That's what
as the years progressed. And one interesting thing is, I had mentioned before about precedent, like, you have a film like Double Indemnity that struggled to get through Joseph Breen and his requirements for a film. And finally, when that film was released, that set the stage for Postman Always Rings Twice to be made, because they struggled for like almost a decade to get that film made, because it was, you know, a very popular novel. It jumped from studio to studio, and it got to the point where you could be like, okay, they make Double Indemnity, and you're gonna have to release this one. This one's kind of similar. So that did happen. But Joseph Breen was a very powerful person, and they had the production code office had say at like very early on, they would read the novels, the scripts, before you could even greenlight a production. So there's a lot of power wielded there.
Yeah.
Right. And then Rob says Carol Lombard climbs a ladder and Clark Gable tries to look at her legs. Apparently has something to do with the code coming into effect.
I can picture the moment he's talking about. But again, yes, that is what.
Yeah, probably.
I've been to a lot of different, like, very provocative scenes that became famous. Just kind of at a snowball effect. Yeah.
I imagine. Yeah.
Did you have any other questions, Steve, or anything else to comment on?
No, I feel I know everything about this now.
Are there what's the best book, Raquel, about pre-code?
Yeah, good question.
So I have two books here. This one is really good, Forbidden Hollywood by Mark Vieira.
Yeah.
I have a book video just describing the book and like what my recommendations are, and like showcasing the interiors and stuff. This is a great like coffee table book, but it's also like complete history on the pre-code era. And Mark Vieira is a film historian and photographer, so it's a very informative and beautifully well put together package. So I highly recommend this one.
All right, yeah. I think I've seen that around different bookstores. Yeah.
And this one I'm reading right now, Complicated Women by Mick LaSalle, and it's all about basically pre-code women, and Norma Shear is the focus. But a lot of the films that we've been discussing today are discussed in the film. In the book. In the book,
okay.
Is the document, because there's also a documentary. Is that based on the book? Is it there on
I'm
YouTube?
Not sure. Probably. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I know there's a companion, Complicated Men, as well.
Okay.
But this one. I know Vanessa has read this and she recommends it. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
I'll have to put those in the description box. Yeah, because there is on YouTube a documentary that you can watch for free where it's called Complicated Women with Jane Fonda doing voiceover.
I bet you it's all about this.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And it's a lot of the movies we discussed that we discussed today is discussed in the documentary. And just lastly, I was curious, what is DVD Netflix that you write for? What is that?
So years ago, before Netflix streaming, it was the competition for Blockbuster here in the United States. But it was you would go online and rent a DVD, and they would mail it to you. You'd mail it back. So that service actually still exists, and it's great, especially if you're like me and you're hunting and pecking for films that you really want to watch, and you don't necessarily want to have like a million streaming services. So one of the things I do for them is I create lists of I write about individual classic movie stars, but I also create lists of films with classic film themes. Like I did one for Noirvember, and I showcase the classic films that they have available to rent.
That's really cool.
Okay, I didn't realize they were still around as a result of the Netflix, the streaming service launching. So
they still have it, and people still use it. I mean, I know a lot of classic film lovers use it because it's a great way to expand your access to a lot of different movies.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. And another thing I was curious about is you've gone to the TCM festival a number of.
Yes.
What's that? That's one of the things on my bucket list. One day I gotta I gotta go. What's it like? How is that?
It is basically a mecca for anyone who loves old movies.
Oh.
It's like I consider it a big family reunion of all of us who just love those old movies. It takes place in Hollywood. There's films and events screened at the old Grauman's Chinese Theater, which is now the TCL Chinese, at the Egyptian. The heart of it is at the Roosevelt Hotels. So you get access to all these really historic places, and we watch all sorts of films. There's panel discussions, presentations, a red carpet, a hand and footprint ceremony. There's so many things going on, and it happens over 3.5 days. We all starve to death because we just want to fit everything into our schedule. And it's just a really great time. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, Steve, you and I are gonna have to go one day.
Yeah. Please, you guys would have a blast.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I've wanted to for a number of years. Okay, well, this has been a really great talk.
This has been a lot of fun.
Again,
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Are you kidding? This is great.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and picking this, because again, it's a topic I knew just a little bit about. But yeah, it actually really makes a lot of sense to look at, where we've gone and where we've been.
Oh, totally.
This, and a lot of these films, as we said, they're on the Forbidden Hollywood DVDs that Raquel was showing. Some are on the Criterion Channel, some are on archive.org, and some are even free on YouTube, to see as well. Yeah, was there anything else? So Raquel, you wanted where can people find you? So Out of the Past is your YouTube channel?
Out of the Past blog is my blog.com is my website, and my YouTube is also Out of the Past blog. And I'm on Twitter, just at my name, at Raquel Stetcher, and I love to talk to people about movies.
Cool.
Okay, awesome. So go over to Raquel's social media platforms and follow her and subscribe to her YouTube channel as well, which is really, really great. And and again, if this is your first time on our channel, or if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing by pressing the subscribe button, which is right in the description box below, and then hit the bell every time we go live or release a new video. We do one live video a week with a guest. Next week at the same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to be talking to one of the last. Well, there's two video stores that still exist in Toronto. One of them is called Bay Street Video. We were actually going to go into the store,
but lockdown.
But we can't, because we've been locked down. But we're going to be talking to Mark, the owner, live about how about the video store, how they've managed to stay open, and just about the video store history in general. And so that'll be a fun one next week at 10:30, and we do 3 video reviews a week, normally Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Okay. Well, Raquel, thanks again. This was really, really great.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
We'll have to have you back sometime for sure.
Yes, please.
Cool.
And everyone who commented and your questions, thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
All right. Okay. Well, take care, everyone.
You too.
See you guys.
Thank you.
See ya.